Law Call is provided in the public interest by Timberlake League and Brooks, which pays an advertising fee to this station.
This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to WAAY 31 Law Call. I'm Sharon Doviet. Tonight we're opening up the phone lines for questions on all kinds of topics, but we are also going to focus on something that's been in the news for Huntsville this week: forever chemical pollution claims. So this week there has been a story about Huntsville Utilities bringing a lawsuit against chemical companies because of forever chemicals that have been found in our drinking water. Chemicals getting in the Tennessee River. We're talking about parts per trillion, but the cost for the government to remove those chemicals from our drinking water, they need to buy new equipment, and that is pricey. So we're going to talk about these forever chemicals, but whatever kind of legal question you've got tonight, call in, be live on the air. 31's Law Call number 256-536-0077. You can call in or you can text to that same number and we'll have your questions. We will also be receiving your email questions. Send an email on any legal topic any day of the week to lawcall@waaytv.com. Getting us started tonight, Heath Brooks is here from Timberlake League and Brooks. Good to have you here.
Very good to be here.
We're going to talk about forever chemicals in just a minute,
sure,
because this is something that you've been working on with some things going on around the Georgia area. You're very familiar with this.
I have, and I am, okay, unfortunately.
And it's something for us. I've got a lot of questions, and to know what to worry about, what not to worry about, sure, maybe some changes to make. So we're going to be talking about that in just a minute. To get us started off, though, while we get some of your calls in, we've got tonight's You Make the Law Call question. So we've got video here tonight of another situation with car crashes. This time it's somebody pulling in front of you and causing an accident. So that's one. There's going to be another one. Similar kind of situation, though. Now, they normally would say you're supposed to be responsible for not hitting the things that are in front of you. But with something like this, who would you say, you guys do car accident cases all the time, who would you say, can you tell who's at fault?
You know, these kinds of situations can be pretty tough because on the one side, the first one I think is pretty clear. It looks like the fella traveling and moving has a green light and somebody just pulls out in front of them. But we see a lot of those cases where do you have a green arrow? Is your light green? Do you have a red arrow to turn? Do you have a yellow flashing arrow? And all of those kinds of questions come to play when you're looking at these T-bone type of collisions at intersections. And a lot of times it's important to have witnesses. I had one the other day where I had to go to a gas station and pull a video to see exactly what happened, because one person is saying, hey, look, I had the green light, and another person is saying, hey, look, I had the green light. And a lot of times it's not a situation where somebody is not being truthful. It's a situation where they really may have believed they had a green light. There's no witnesses around. Then you get a video and you see, well, you had a solid green light, but you had a yellow turn arrow. So you have to yield to oncoming traffic. And it looks like in those two scenarios that there should have been some yielding to oncoming traffic. Likely it's the person coming from the side view's fault. But those are important situations when you get in a wreck at an intersection and you're dealing with a situation of who has the red light, who has the green light, who has the turn arrow, those kinds of things. You can get into some real issues. Hopefully you have a witness. Hopefully you have a video. Look around. Get in touch with an attorney generally in those cases as soon as possible, because a lot of times an attorney can put resources to work and get video of what happened.
For your case, did you get the video?
We were able to get the video.
And that makes a difference.
It made a huge difference.
But most gas stations are not going to keep that video forever. So if you wait even a couple of weeks to get a lawyer on it, you've lost the video.
Sharon, that is an excellent point. Generally on those closed circuit televisions, you've got no more than 30 days, but a lot of times you have even less than that. I mean, you know, the technology is there now where you can, your closed circuit TV goes to your cell phone. We've all got, you know, a lot of folks have those on their homes where you've got a camera that goes to your cell phone. You can look at your camera, but then after 30 days, it's no longer there. So very important to collect that information. Make sure you have somebody collect that information. It can mean everything in a case. Sure can. So
tonight we're going to focus on forever chemicals, and there's been a lawsuit filed. So Huntsville Utilities, see if I've got this right, Huntsville Utilities has filed a lawsuit against some chemical companies because of forever chemicals being in the Tennessee River and getting into our drinking water.
That's right.
Now they say it's not a dangerous level, but they're looking to get new equipment in the future, and they say the citizens shouldn't have to pay for this. The companies who put it in there should have to pay for that equipment. So you've done a bunch of cases on this, right?
Right. So let's unpack this a little bit. So there's a couple of different regulations from the EPA, well, advisories from the EPA. The EPA has issued an advisory, which water authorities do not have to follow, but the EPA advisory says 0% PFAS in your water is
Zero,
safe.
zero, zero.
None.
Okay.
You don't need to have any of these chemicals in your water. And we call them forever chemicals because we haven't found a very good way to get rid of them. They will persist in the environment once they get in the environment forever. Now, there's a lot of research coming out about how to get rid of them, and I think with time we will develop some solutions, but right now we don't have any. And the way these things are utilized a lot within the carpet manufacturing industry, within the clothing industry. Any type of fabric that repels water or material that repels water or resists stains, generally you're using a PFAS product, a forever chemical. PFAS is the fancy term for a forever chemical product in the manufacture of those goods. And so the city of Huntsville Utilities filed a lawsuit against the manufacturers of these chemicals, 3M, DuPont and its companies, Daikin, a couple other manufacturers, and then also the users. So these large companies will manufacture the chemicals, and then the companies will buy these chemicals and utilize them in the manufacture of their finished products. A lot of carpet companies utilize PFAS in the manufacture of their, or forever chemicals in the manufacture of their products. And then those chemicals that are used in the carpet industry go out through the wastewater into the ecosystem, into our rivers and into our groundwater.
So the product itself, once we get it, the carpet may be safe for us to use, but the chemicals that were made, that's the problem, generally.
That's generally it, because what you're looking at is the first application of these chemicals onto the product.
Yeah.
Generally, a lot of them are going to come off. You're going to have some product, some of that PFAS, that forever chemical that comes off and is washed out through the wash system of the plant. A lot of times that goes into the river. A lot of times that goes into the city municipal system where it can be deposited on farm fields with sludge. And that's the issue we're dealing with up in northwest Georgia and into northeastern Alabama. But the reality is that these chemicals do get into our water system for whatever manner in which the delivery is there. And then the water system becomes contaminated. It gets into the settlement at the bottom of the rivers. We pull it into our pipes. We run it through our filtration system, and it goes into your home. And the problem is that our filtration system doesn't clean out these chemicals, not the ones we use right now.
Okay. Your family at your home, do you use something, home filtering kind of system?
We do.
Okay.
We do. And you got to be careful when you get a filter system, whether that's a pitcher filter that you can get, or you can get what's called a reverse osmosis filter for your house.
More expensive?
It is more expensive, or for your under your sink. You can get a under the sink reverse osmosis filter system that can help out. But you need to make sure when you get a filtration system that it is specific for getting PFAS chemicals or forever chemicals out of the water. Because if you go and you just get a filter that doesn't have that specification, it is not going to remove PFAS. And there's a big reason for that. And that is that these chemicals are very, very, very small.
Okay.
We measure them not in, oftentimes, and folks who don't measure chemicals don't know how to call it, but oftentimes we're measuring chemicals in water. You look at a glass of water, and the water looks clear. But if I were to take that water and I were to put it under a microscope, under a very strong microscope, I would see tiny particles of a lot of different things in that water. And I would measure how many of those tiny things in the water are in that glass of water. And I could tell you whether there is 300 of those chemicals per parts per billion or parts per million. We measure PFAS chemicals in parts per trillion.
Okay.
And that's very
tiny.
Small. Tiny.
How many of these different kind of lawsuits are going on around the country?
You know, there's a lot. There's a lot, and I couldn't tell you the exact number, but I can tell you there's clusters of it. So generally what you see is that in areas of manufacture where the wastewater hasn't been properly treated, then that wastewater oftentimes goes into a sewage treatment plant facility, and that sewage has got to be put somewhere. So it's put into a landfill, or it's put on farm fields as fertilizer, and the material that went through the sewage treatment plant, because it can't be filtered out, it gets very concentrated. And then you have concentrated forever chemicals put on farm fields that move down through the soil and ultimately end up in the groundwater and ultimately pollute wells or pollute city municipal water systems like what we're dealing with in Huntsville, or other places around the country. But what you're looking for is you're looking for industries that utilize PFAS in the PFAS, forever chemicals, in the manufacture of their products. And if you can find those areas, that's where you're going to find PFAS pollution.
Is it possible for those companies to filter it out, to not release it, or is it so tiny that a lot of this is going to get out regardless?
There are the fancy term for that is best management practices.
Okay.
So there are ways, and there is a way that these companies that use PFAS can get PFAS out of their water system.
Okay.
They can run it through a filtration process just the same way as the city is.
Is going to have to.
Here's the problem, though, and this is what you run into when you run into companies utilizing these chemicals. They have a bottom line. And the cost of treating the water to get out these chemicals before it gets into yours and my drinking water is extremely high. And so the cost to the city, to the city of Huntsville, to the Huntsville utilities, to get these chemicals out of the water can be astronomically high. I'm talking $100 million or more to get these chemicals out. So it is very expensive. It is a very big system. And you know, if you think about it, and you've got the system underneath your sink that is removing these chemicals out. Well, that's a small system. You've got your drinking water, but you expand that by 350,000 residents. Yeah. Well, now we've got more, and we got 15 people coming here every day.
Right.
We've got a lot of people in Huntsville and in the surrounding areas that use the water from the Tennessee River, and so you start talking about a massive water treatment facility, and we have multiple places where we treat our water and multiple places from where we get our water. So, it's a problem. Okay.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back answering more of your questions and looking forward to your calls in. The 31 Law Call number 536-0077.
Law Call is provided in the public interest by Timberlake League & Brooks, which pays an advertising fee to this station.
You're watching WAAY 31 Law Call, the Tennessee Valley's only live legal call-in show for 30 years and counting. Presented by the award-winning personal injury and wrongful death law firm Timberlake League & Brooks, featuring the knowledge and experience of attorney Michael Timberlake, attorney Will League, attorney Heath Brooks, attorney William Meservey, attorney Bobby Marsh, and hosted by family law attorney Sharon Doviet. Your rights, your calls, live. This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Welcome back. We are talking about forever chemicals. There's a lawsuit filed this week, Huntsville Utilities, against some chemical companies because very low levels of forever chemicals have been found in our drinking water. Utility company says the water is still safe, but they want to get these chemicals out, and it's going to be very expensive to do.
It is.
You've got cases like that in Georgia, other things that have been going on for quite some time, and there are a number of these sorts of lawsuits around the country. Have any of them ever gotten resolved? Do we have resolutions on any of these cases?
There have been some resolutions of cases. I know that, for instance, up in Decatur, there were a couple of cases where the Decatur water had been contaminated with 3M Daikin chemicals, or the allegations were there, and that those claims, I believe, have resolved at this point in time. So there are some all around the country that get resolved, and really the cases are in a couple of different arenas. First type of case involving these types of chemicals are, these chemicals have gotten into the public water drinking system, and what does that public water authority do to get it out? And most towns and cities do not have the resources to be able to just dump hundreds of millions of dollars into a new filtration system. So the only way that they can address those issues is to file legal action against the companies that either made the chemicals or used the chemicals that got into the drinking water. That's the first type of case. The second type of case involves when these chemicals get on somebody's private property. And so we've seen that up in Northwest Alabama. We've seen that up in Northeast Alabama. We're seeing that right now up in Northwest Georgia, where I'm involved in these types of cases, where the chemicals have migrated to farmland or other areas that now that land is contaminated with massive amounts of these chemicals that have moved down through the soil, gotten into the groundwater, and people can't drink their water at all. And a lot of times these are in rural areas where people don't have a utility company providing them water. They are relying upon their wells to feed to water their families, to water their cattle, to water their crops. So this is a big problem in those areas. And then, of course, the third type of case involves some type of injury from consuming these chemicals. And that's why they're dangerous, is that there are a number of diseases that have been linked with prolonged consumption of these forever chemicals. Things like thyroid disorders and cancers, kidney cancer, testicular cancer, pancreatic cancer, other disorders that we believe as we move along in the research world that we may find additional links to. It's really not a good chemical to be consuming. It's a chemical. And generally speaking, if you consume these types of chemicals over a prolonged period of time, they can be hazardous to your health.
So Huntsville Utilities is taking care of the lawsuit for the citizens for the drinking water.
Right.
If somebody's worried about a family member has gotten one of these illnesses, they bring their own lawsuit. If their land is now worthless, they bring their own lawsuit.
Yeah.
Sounds expensive.
Yeah, you know, and there's two different ways those types of cases are being handled too. So any cases involving an injury because of PFAS, and that means if you've developed a type of testicular cancer or bladder cancer or kidney cancer or ulcerative colitis or thyroid cancer, those cases are handled up in a federal court in South Carolina. And I know that sounds strange, but what ends up happening is a bunch of people file a lawsuit against a bunch of companies who have produced PFAS or used PFAS, these forever chemicals, and then a federal judge has taken it over in South Carolina, and all cases involving those types of injuries are handled up in South Carolina. It's not a class action. It functions kind of like a class action, but all injury cases are up in South Carolina, so you have thousands and thousands of these cases dealing with injuries in South Carolina in a federal court. When it comes to property damage, most cases involving the loss of property and PFAS are handled in state courts. The ones that I am handling are handled in Gordon County in Georgia. But those types of cases involve trespass because some company or multiple companies have allowed this chemical to get onto your property. And it's kind of like if you, Sharon, go on my property without permission, now you're trespassing on my property. And right, you can come on my property anytime you want.
I wouldn't have thought of it as trespass.
But yeah, so if a chemical crosses a line, then that's a trespass on your property.
Interesting.
It can also be a nuisance because now you can't get out in your garden and plant your fruit and your vegetables, because here's the crazy thing about these chemicals. They get into the soil, they get into the water, then they get into your plants, they get into your tomatoes, and they get into your fruit, and so they become to a point where you might not want to eat that stuff because it's become polluted as well.
Can you clean it out? Can you ever clean it out?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. There are ways to remediate. They call that, the fancy term for that is remediation. There are ways to remediate this chemical. It, again, is very, very costly because they so easily move down through the soil that if you want to clean it out of the soil, oftentimes you have to take massive amounts of soil. Sometimes you can get it out by burning it, and then you got to put the soil back. So this is a mess. You know, it's a mess, and these companies are going to have to clean it up one way or another, I believe.
So with the person who owned the land, are they going to be paid like the value of the land, what the land was worth, or do they get more than that? If this is your family land and you're run off it, it seems like you ought to get more than the land is actually worth. Yeah, you know, I mean, there's a couple of different ways that that's handled. And the Water Authority in Huntsville, the Huntsville Utilities, has also claimed a trespass damage because these chemicals have moved into the public drinking water source. So they're claiming trespass, they're claiming nuisance, they're claiming the same things that a lot of private landowners are claiming under those same theories. But if it goes onto your property and it ruins your property, there are some damages you can claim, like you can claim loss of enjoyment of your property because now you can't enjoy it. You can claim the value that your property has lost. Oftentimes, if you learn that a chemical has contaminated your property, you now have an obligation to tell any future buyer that there is actual chemical contamination on your property. So that becomes a whole different issue because who wants to buy a piece of property that's contaminated? Interesting. You know, and so those are the types of damages you can claim. So if I'm worried about it and I live in Huntsville and I'm getting the tap water and they say that water's safe to drink, can I test my water? I mean, can I test for this stuff? How expensive is it for me to run a test on my tap water coming out of my faucet?
You know, I got to answer a question kind of lawyerly with a bigger answer.
It depends.
It's interesting that what has happened in the last 10 to 15 years, because these chemicals have been utilized in our manufacturing industries for decades.
Yeah.
But the harmful effects of these chemicals have not really been made public.
Okay.
And so in the last 20 to 25 years, really a lot of information about how these chemicals affect us has been made public. Well, once that starts happening, people want to know, hey, is it in my water? Hey, is it in my soil? Hey, is it in the air that I breathe? All three ways these chemicals can move through our environment. And so as a result of that, what ends up happening is companies start coming up with solutions to test. And so now there are companies where you can take a water sample.
Okay.
You can write the company, or you can get online. You don't have to write them. You get online, order your test kit.
Okay.
Test kit will come to your house. It's a very, very simple solution. You can you run the water into the cup. You let the cup pass through the filter. You send the filter back to the company, and they'll email you the test results. There's a company that we've utilized, Cyclopure, and they test for PFAS. But there are several others out there that do test for PFAS. There's companies now that test for PFAS in the blood of cattle. There are companies now that test your soil.
Wow.
You know, to determine what concentrations of these forever chemicals are in your soil. And so, you know, it's become a situation where there is a lot of testing that is available.
Fairly cheap. Fairly cheap.
Yeah, fairly inexpensive. For, you know, you would think that it'd be crazy expensive, and you know, everybody's got a different idea of what's expensive and not expensive, but it's fairly reasonable to test your water. Soil, blood, that gets a little different.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back answering more of your questions about forever chemicals. Stay with us.
LawCall is provided in the public interest by Timberlake League and Brooks, which pays an advertising fee to this station.
If you haven't gotten your questions answered tonight, here's how to get in touch with Heath Brooks with Timberlake League and Brooks. They are personal injury attorneys, so everything from forever chemicals to car accidents and medical malpractice. 256-536-0770 or 800-804-2502. The website is law-injury.com, and if you like them on Facebook, you can learn more about the law that way.
And if you need to get in touch with Sharon, she does family law. That's divorces, child custody, and the like. She can be reached at 256-539-7337 or www.sharonfamilylaw.com.
In our last seconds, this makes me very worried.
Yeah, you know, don't panic. I mean, here's the deal about these chemicals. The more we learn about them, and this is the way that all chemicals go, the more we learn about them, the more stringent the regulations become, the more we realize, okay, these things are harmful. But, you know, the federal government is going to come up with some stricter standards, 4 parts per trillion. That's coming in the next 5 years. Hopefully, we can get these companies to step up to the plate and get our water clean.
Okay. I'm going to get a filter. I'm going to shop for filters. Thanks for all your calls and questions tonight. We'll see you next week.
Have a great night.